Friends, today we're going to talk about a very important development in global trade and geopolitics, a development that directly connects Europe's energy crisis, India's economic rise, and the shifting balance of power in the world. The headline is simple but powerful. After the European Union's ban on Russian fuels, India's diesel exports to Europe have skyrocketed. In August alone, shipments rose by an incredible 137%. Yes, you heard that right. 137% in just 1 month. Why is this happening? Why is Europe suddenly turning towards India for diesel? And what does this mean for India's economy, for Europe's energy security, and for the larger global order? In this talk, I will explain the full picture, step by step, so you can clearly understand not only the numbers, but also the strategy and the future impact. Let us begin with Europe. For decades, Europe was dependent on Russian energy, both crude oil and diesel. But after the Ukraine war and the sanctions that followed, Europe made a bold decision to cut off imports of Russian fuels. That decision, though politically strong, created a massive problem. Overnight, Europe faced a supply gap of nearly 1 million barrels of diesel per day. Imagine that: millions of cars, trucks, factories, and households that still depend on diesel fuel. Where would Europe get that supply from? This is where India enters the story. India saw the gap, and India filled the gap. Over the past year, India has been importing discounted crude oil from Russia, refining it in Indian refineries, and then exporting the refined diesel to other countries. Now, with Europe desperate for alternative suppliers, India became one of the most important sources, and the results are striking. In August alone, diesel exports from India to Europe surged by 137% compared to the previous month. That is not a small increase. That is not a routine fluctuation. That is a signal of a structural change in the global energy market. Now let's think about what this means for India. First, it means revenue. Every shipment of diesel exported to Europe brings in billions of dollars. That strengthens India's trade balance and supports the rupee. Second, it means jobs and growth. Refineries in India are running at high capacity. Shipping and logistics companies are active, and the entire ecosystem of trade is benefiting. Third, it means leverage. In geopolitics, energy is power. By becoming a key supplier to Europe, India gains more influence in negotiations, in partnerships, and in global forums. But it is not just about India. For Europe, these shipments are a lifeline. Without them, energy prices would skyrocket even further, inflation would rise, and industries would suffer. In fact, economists say that India's exports helped stabilize European energy markets this summer, preventing a deeper crisis. So Europe is not just buying diesel from India, is building trust and partnership with India. Now let's pause for a moment and ask, is this only about economics, or is it about politics as well? The answer is both. On one hand, this is pure trade buying and selling fuel in the open market. But on the other hand, this is about geopolitics. Europe wants to reduce its dependence on Russia. By importing from India, it is not only securing fuel, but also strengthening ties with a rising power in Asia. At the same time, India continues to buy crude oil from Russia, refine it, and sell it forward. So India is balancing between East and West, between Moscow and Brussels, between discounted imports and profitable exports. That balancing act is a masterstroke of diplomacy. Let me also point out one more thing. This surge shows India's long-term ambition. India is not satisfied with being just a consumer of energy. India wants to be a refining hub, a supply hub, and a trusted partner in the global chain. With the right investments in infrastructure, pipelines, and ports, India can continue to grow this role in the coming decade. Of course, there are challenges. Global oil prices are volatile. Shipping costs are rising. And Europe is also investing heavily in renewable energy. Over time, demand for diesel will decline. So India must use this golden window wisely. The money earned today should be reinvested into technology, green energy, and long-term competitiveness. As we reach the end of this discussion, one thing becomes crystal clear. The surge in India's diesel exports to Europe is not just a short-term trade statistic. It is a defining moment in global geopolitics and economics. When the European Union decided to cut off Russian fuel imports, many experts feared chaos, skyrocketing prices, severe shortages, and industries grinding to a halt. Yet, in the middle of this storm, India stepped forward. By boosting exports, India filled a vacuum that even the most advanced economies in Europe could not immediately fill. This is not only about barrels of diesel. This is about India announcing its presence on the world stage as a reliable, flexible, and powerful trade partner. The 137% surge is a reminder of how quickly global supply chains can shift when geopolitics demands it. For decades, Europe was comfortable with Russia as its main supplier. That comfort vanished almost overnight. But the gap was not left unfilled. Instead, India became the bridge. This shows us a deeper truth. In today's interconnected world, power is not only about armies and weapons, it is about who can keep the wheels of the global economy running. And energy, especially fuel, remains the lifeblood of that economy. For India, the lesson is equally powerful. By seizing this opportunity, India has shown that it is not afraid to play in the big leagues. This is a country that has always been seen as a consumer market, as a buyer of technology, as a nation striving for growth. But today, India has shown that it can also be a supplier, a stabilizer, and a problem solver for other nations. Europe may not have expected India to rise so quickly in this space, but now the partnership is real and the trust is growing. But perhaps the most important conclusion is about the future. This surge is not guaranteed forever. Energy markets are volatile, and Europe is already pushing hard into renewables. Russia will not remain cut off forever, and new suppliers from the Middle East or Africa may enter the picture. India must therefore treat this as a window of opportunity, not a permanent advantage. The revenues earned from these exports must be reinvested wisely into refining capacity, into renewable energy, into technology, and into making India's role in global trade permanent, not temporary. At the same time, India's balancing act between Russia and Europe will continue to be closely watched. Can India keep buying discounted Russian crude while selling refined diesel to Europe? For now, the answer is yes. But this is a diplomatic tightrope that requires careful walking. If India plays it well, it will not only maintain profits, but also strengthen its position as an independent, autonomous power in a polarized world. So, when we look at this 137% surge, we should not see just numbers. We should see strategy. We should see a story of resilience, of quick thinking, and of bold action. And we should see the beginning of a future where India is not just participating in global trade, but shaping it. The world is changing, and India is no longer at the sidelines. It is at the center, with Europe depending on its fuel, Russia depending on its trade partnership, and the world depending on its balance. That is the true meaning of this surge, and that is why the world must now pay attention to India's next move.